from the period of time of about when I was a sophomore in high school to my mid-20s, I worked with developmentally disabled children and adults, and was pretty satisfied doing that in Alaska. And then, in spite of the fact that I'd had many CPR classes, I was working at a new site with a new group of adults with developmental disabilities, and a woman had a seizure and she stopped breathing, and I was the only person there who was accountable and responsible for the individuals who were working at that site. And this individual curled up in a chair, turned blue, stopped breathing, and it was pretty alarming for me because even though I had taken all these CPR classes, at the time nobody really told us how to do CPR in a chair or how to deal with those circumstances. So even though this person eventually, what seemed like a very long time, started breathing again and was okay, it really sparked a passion in me to look beyond what I was doing at the time to helping people in other circumstances, specifically emergencies where there were situations that are unpredictable, where it might be possible to follow a certain series of steps to make those better. I originally registered for an EMT class in Juneau, Alaska. It was canceled. They wouldn't let me return my books. I moved to Olympia, Washington on a very small amount of money, tried to become an EMT there. Couldn't do so. The only program was open to volunteer firefighters, and I couldn't be one because I lived in the wrong zip code. After struggling and working for about a year and having various things happen, like my car catch on fire and have to catch the bus everywhere and that sort of thing, I was able to hold down a job in Kent, Washington at FedEx and take the bus about 3 hours a day to work from Seattle, and then to go to North Seattle Community College, where I finished my EMT class and immediately got a job working with drug-dependent, predominantly homeless population, a place called Dutch Schessler Sobering Center in Seattle, and also started working on the ambulance. And my path was always to be a paramedic. I just thought that that was such a amazing thing to be able to, walk into all sorts of situations and be able to help people. And so I, after a period of time working as a transporting ambulance EMT and at this sobering center, I was accepted into Foothill College in Los Altos Hills, where I continued studying becoming a paramedic, and actually continued to work with the developmentally disabled at that time as well. And from there on out, I obviously passed paramedic school and worked on the ambulance, as well as working with the developmentally disabled, as well as teaching, and basically juggled multiple jobs getting by until this opportunity came up at the Oakland Fire Department in a teaching position at the EMS division.
And why don't you talk about what it was like there getting the job and what happened?
It was interesting at the time. Like I said, I was teaching emergency medicine in a variety of capacities. For a private agency, I was also working as a paramedic and also working with developmentally disabled individuals. And when I originally got on at Oakland Fire, it was very nice from the standpoint of never having made that much money, having a civil service job where you had health care and certain expectations like paid time off and that sort of thing was a relatively new thing to me at the time. But there was also interesting standards or rules that were unwritten. For example, I asked my boss at the time, EMS division manager Gene English, if I should be sent to a new hire orientation, because they had publications about that. And she said something that always stuck with me, saying, "You work for me." So, implying that my time is not to be spent in new hire orientations, it's to be working and learning from her. So and I still haven't received a new hire orientation for the city of Oakland, which is, going on 6 years now. That's kind of interesting. But, overall, it was offered a lot of challenges and wasn't entirely a bad experience.
So what were the conditions like in Oakland working as a paramedic?
Well, for the record, I was hired as an administrative level personnel. So although there have been rules about having requirements for field oversight on the books as far as I can remember, there has functionally never been any level of field oversight as far as clinical field supervision of paramedics that I'm aware of, ever. Having said that, my job was relatively well structured. It originally started out that I was called a BLS coordinator, Basic Life Support Coordinator, which involved a lot of education and overseeing requirements for emergency medical technicians, not paramedics. But also other duties. As assigned role was, as many civil servants are aware, is a job that you end up doing most of the time, so helping other people without whatever demands were at the time turned out to be a large portion of my job. Eventually I was moved into the position of Advanced Life Support Coordinator, which was responsible for paramedic oversight, and then only recently was I moved into a position called the Training Officer, EMS Training Officer, which is exclusively responsible for education.
How many are there in Oakland?
Sorry?
How many training officers are there in Oakland for EMS?
I'd be the only one.
You're the only training officer.
Mm-hmm.
So what issues did you have, concerns did you have in the agency and how did they develop? What happened?
Well, I guess, to be fair, before I was an EMT or paramedic, I had some sort of concept of what that would be like. And then I got the job and I found that was very different than my expectations were. So similarly, before I was an administrator, I had some sort of concept of how things worked. And in this field where you have very clearly defined rules, and also where people's lives are often resting on following certain rules, you always would hope and expect that people follow the rules. So becoming an administrator was very interesting in that I learned a whole lot about things that people on the line, or as we say, or paramedics and firefighters, do not see day to day. But I also noticed that there were instances where even people at the administrative level weren't following rules as were dictated by county or state or whatever mandate, even their own rules, city policy. And that...
What were some of these rules that you were following?
Well, one of the ones that we have been talking a lot about in my case are the city county rules on reporting unusual occurrences from the administration manual, and also the field oversight, the requirement that there's some clinical oversight for paramedics in the field, just like you would have in any job. You might imagine in any position, cooks, somebody looking over their shoulder making sure that somebody's making food properly, police officers, somebody looking over their shoulder making sure they're doing their police work properly, paramedics, somebody looking over their shoulder, are you getting that IV properly? Are you running that cardiac resuscitation properly? Those sort of things. And to my knowledge, functionally that's never happened. Informally it may happen at some level, and there's all sorts of internal dialogues about whether that should be a sworn or unsworn position. But ironically, I was provided a copy of my job description 2 weeks ago for the first time that I can remember, and it had on there clinical oversight. I made a special point to say, I've been requesting clinical oversight and encouraging clinical oversight for as long as I can remember. Remember, the fire department's a paramilitary environment, so you have captains, officers. Some departments have lieutenants, some departments don't. Our department does have lieutenant rank, battalion chiefs, and these are all levels of oversight. But what we're talking about is medical oversight, and who is qualified to supervise or oversee medical activities on medical calls. Paramedics are the highest level of care in the pre-hospital setting, most instances, and common sense would dictate that a paramedic supervisor or somebody who holds a rank that is equivalent of a paramedic supervision, like a battalion chief. A pattern kind of emerged of some management practices that I was growing more and more concerned about, including my forced removal from Merritt College and me moving from an office on the waterfront to a trailer behind the training tower, and them taking away my mailbox, and all these little things started to emerge. Instead of, basically, if I had to summarize it, the message seemed to be, instead of us following the rules, instead of us needing to change, you're the one who needs to change, and the change needs to be, you got to get out of here. Far beyond the whole whistleblowing dialogue that we have going, logic would dictate that, if you have a team of people, let's imagine your whole office is the members of, one car ride together on a road trip, and they notice that the person who's currently at the wheel likes to blow stop signs, regardless of whether the feedback is taken well or not, it's actually a friendly thing to do to let somebody know that they're blowing stop signs, because that's a rule that's in place, a law that's in place, that actually prevents people from dying, because when nobody follows stop signs, people get into car accidents and people get hurt. So similarly, I think the most distressing thing, and feels like it's taken a lot of energy out of me, is constantly revisiting a situation that does not seem to move or change.
You raised these concerns. They took the Oscar Grant investigation out of your hands, and the medical director was in charge.
Initially I had one thing that I think needs to be just on the table is that people in every career profession make mistakes. A couple years ago, a big part of the Bay Bridge fell down on the Bay Bridge. I'm sure that wasn't supposed to happen. You read every newspaper, Michael Jackson's doctor, whatever happened there. Career professions, you make mistakes. And that's the reason why you have clinical oversight, you have retraining, you have policies and practices to basically offer as a support service. If you're having trouble doing your job, what can we do about it? What's the nature of it? And without that support structure, there's no way to tell. And this is something that we talk about a lot, is that if you don't know why something isn't happening properly, you can't tell whether it's a training issue, you can't tell whether it's a skill decay, whether somebody never knew it in the first place, the aptitude problem. It's just hard to say. So, sorry, go ahead.
Are there any black paramedics in the city of Oakland?
Yeah.
Okay. And Latino paramedics?
Yeah.
So, who was the person that dealt with the Oscar Grant?
In this case, it initially would have been the fire department.
And how many paramedics were involved in the Oscar Grant case?
I can't tell. Per our FROWS contract with the county, there's an agreement that 2 paramedics need to be on every 911 call, and that in this form is at least 1 from the fire department and at least 1 from the transport providing agency, which at this time and that time was American Medical Response. It's possible that there were more people who were trained at the paramedic level, but were not, obligated by contract to be there. And like I said, having not been there, I am basically start dealing with it in levels of administrative oversight.
Well, after he was shot, how long was it before he got medical care?
I do not know the answer to that question.
Has that been investigated?
To answer your question better, there's multiple agencies on scene, so that may have been investigated by the BART administration. It may have been investigated by the ambulance transport provider. But like I said, our investigation would have looked at those sort of things. So from our standpoint, my understanding is that investigation would have ended when our investigation ended, which was pretty much at the beginning.
But so what happened with the investigation?
It was suppressed.
The investigation of the care of Oscar Grant was suppressed. And that was done by who?
The interim EMS division manager, Nina Morris.
And the reason she gave is that she would handle it.
No, she originally moved it to Dr. Michaels, and then didn't want to do a call review where we actually try and talk about it. Basically get the personnel involved to extrapolate on what wasn't a non-punitive way here. We're just going to go over the facts and see what went well and what could have gone better, and dig further into the matter. And from what I understand, it was completely suppressed.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how many black paramedics are there in your division?
At the present time, there are, there would be one clerical support staff who is African American, but other than that, as far as management or instructor level, there's none. The one staff that we had who was very successful and well liked by the department quit about 3 months ago.
And what was the reason he quit?
He wouldn't say. A lot of the things that he gradually became aware of about my case, I understand bothered him, but I don't want to speak for him as far as it was something that happened with me. I am aware that time card padding happened to pay for uniforms.
What is that all about? Why would you have to have time card padding?
Where it was approved above my level to purchase uniforms for EMS instructors through issuing them hours on their time card that were for time never worked. And he was the only instructor that I'm aware of that did not receive the benefit of that arrangement. But I'm not going to speak for him regarding the reasons he left. He also is very successful in his career in general, so he may have had other reasons.
But I mean, he was supporting you though in this whole issue of what happened to you and your retaliation against you. He was concerned about you.
Again, I wouldn't want to speak for him regarding his concerns. I think he could speak for himself.
Is he willing to do that?
I think possibly, but I know that he experienced his own frustration level and often said for a long time that the only reason he really stuck around was his how much he appreciated the firefighters and paramedics of the department and saw it as an important job to do, to teach. Well,
I mean, this so the death of Oscar Grant has become is a very important issue of what happened. How often is it that there is an investigation when somebody has morbidity or is killed or something like that? Does that happen very often? I mean, just an overview of that. How the practice, the treatment.
My understanding is that an investigation does not occur very often. Per the amount of, you got to remember, in a very busy 911 district, it's unfortunate to think about, but there are a large amount of 911 calls and events that occur, and a fair amount of them are people dying. So doing an investigation on even a percentage of that would be a lot of investigations. So I'm pretty comfortable with saying that I'm unaware of a lot of investigations that have happened or possibly should have happened. So, even asking for an investigation in that climate, in my opinion, if you look at the number of investigations that have occurred, says something.
So it's unusual.
I don't believe that it's supposed to be unusual. I mean, you remember this is, you want to be able to provide the sort of uniformity in how things are done, that doing your job, even though it's about these serious matters, shouldn't feel unusual, but given the situation that the climate we were working in, requesting a call review, asking for an investigation, autopsy reports, definitely didn't happen every day or even every week or even every month.
I mean, the question people would ask, well, could he have been saved? I mean, that's the issue. Was proper if improper procedure took place, did that mean that he would have died or he would have lived? I mean, is there any?
So, in order to know facts like that, you would have to do an investigation, and you would have to probably do one far beyond my level, where you would get the report from the coroner's office. Dr. Michaels is a surgeon. He's maybe qualified to look at all the documents once they're put together and shed some light on it. There's time issues, as you said, time to treatment, type of care received, what happens at the ER and OR and that sort of thing. But really, if you're not allowed to talk about these issues and investigate, then there's no chance of answering any questions, because anything else is speculative.
And you basically just wanted an investigation review of this thing.
Yeah, either way. I worked there, and I was involved with the union as well as other activities like National Night Out and teaching CPR classes for the community long before we had an intact CPR program, and doing Merritt College and that sort of thing. I thought, I would go to these union meetings and I would ask about various stuff. And I noticed that early on that the union meetings seemed more political rather than like workers' rights issues. This person's running for an election, this contract is coming up. And I thought that was kind of, being new, I thought that was kind of interesting and not the way I imagined it. But one of the things I also thought was interesting was, the concept of a grievance, where I figured, a grievance was like, you are represented, so you fill out a little piece of paper, you give it to your union representative, and they take it, and they have, very narrow window of time to follow through on this, so they're going to follow through on this and submit it. And there was even some times where we had union meetings where we discussed that, and the climate was really like there had been some instances when that narrow window of time, usually 10 days, was not followed. There was just the perception. Now, I am grateful to be in a bargaining unit, because especially in this political climate, there is the perception that, especially government unions, sometimes people think that they shouldn't exist. I can tell you right now, I would probably most definitely not be a city employee if I was not represented, because if I was not represented, it would have been very easy for them to have figured out a way to usher me to the door much earlier. Having said that, specifically, getting the union to file grievances in my case was much, much harder than I ever thought. And the confusing part is I couldn't really wrap my mind around what the union had to lose from filing these grievances. It would seem like, that's something that would, if anything, strengthen their position with the city when it would come to bargaining, as far as perceived wrongs or questions that have happened in the workplace. So, and maybe I'll never have the answers, but my experience of the union is playing moderator with the city rather than, and one thing that might be interesting to note is that the human resources personnel who is handling my case is also in my same bargaining unit. I like him as a person. I've always gotten along with him, sat next to him at union meetings, but I've had to remind myself that this is a person who, when they sit with you in a meeting with your boss, is representing the city, and when they tell you you can't bring a union representative, they're representing the city. And
has that happened?
Oh yeah. And I've even put in writing time and time again, the city consistently brings personnel to performance or investigatory related meetings relating me that they do not tell me they're going to bring ahead of time. Please give me notice prior to bringing people to these meetings, or at least tell me who's going to be there ahead of time. And they still, as recently as 3 weeks ago, they didn't do that. I had my annual performance appraisal. I was told that I was not allowed to have a union representative, and I was under the understanding that this would just be with my employer, and sure enough, Human Resources showed up. And so anyway,
and the union representative, was it the union person?
Yeah, it was the guy who's doing it. But and like I said, I don't know whether it was it's some sort of default in myself, because maybe I should be a lot more angry than I am. But a lot of these individuals, I kind of accept the circumstance for what it is, and I don't, I've as a manager have a very difficult job as well, so I don't harbor any ill against them. But it's a pretty surreal situation from the standpoint of what people would expect from normal reality.
And temporary employees.
And the temporary employees?
What happens with them? Temporary employees.
Yeah. I mean, the whole thing. I mean, it's a tricky thing, because at one side, we really want the community to support labor in general. And the other side, especially in government, you owe the community transparency, because we always need to look for these ways to remind the community that the government is really for them in a democratic society. And providing transparency, similarly to the person in the car who's saying you're blowing the stop signs consistently, you need to stop doing that, should be a reassuring thing to the community members, in that they have a government that is still open to self-correction and not trying to sweep things under the rug, so to speak. But I think that my kind of saga is so far beyond what people would expect of a normal civil service employment experience, that it makes for a lot of paperwork. And I have to credit my people who have been active in supporting me in the union, like Moises Montoya, or my lawyer Phil Horne, who've worked diligently, sometimes at the drop of a dime. The city will tell me they're doing an investigatory hearing on me tomorrow, and that if I don't show, they're alleging a crime against me, and allege that if I don't show up to this meeting, I will be, risk termination. And they already have tons of documentation saying I shouldn't have taken previously approved sick time, and so there's, if I don't go, there's a specter of all sorts of personal threats. And my lawyer and people who support me in the union will meet till 11 p.m. at night, trying to unsort this, these very what we perceive to be as heinous traps that have kind of been placed around me. So for those sort of things, I'm really grateful, and that's really positive. And I think it speaks to the fact that my case has a lot of merit and has garnered some support behind it. But on the other side, having your HR manager attend the same union meetings, it definitely doesn't make it one of those old kind of rabble-rousing union meetings where people get together and talk about all the wrongs that management has done.
Has the chapter taken a position in support of your?
Yeah. I've got a letter written from the headquarters saying that they are not representing me anymore, because I've chosen to take legal representation, primarily because I didn't feel like the union was representing me to the extent that I felt was necessary to defend myself. And I still feel that way, based on how far the situation is cascaded. And the only support I'm getting in the union is by individuals electively.
So the union, you're talking Bob Muscat, sent you a letter. The union sent you a letter saying we're no longer going to represent you?
Yeah, the administrative offices. I don't know if it was from Bob Muscat or their attorneys, or But yeah,
have they taken up a political campaign to defend you?
Oh no, yeah.
But it sounds like you're being politically targeted. You're being administratively targeted, but they don't want you there to raise issues of concern.
Well, you know, my impression, even though I do appreciate the support that I was provided by the union, was that they were searching for more of a common ground. For lack of a better term, you know, there's some problems with management, but there's also some problems with you. Can't you guys all get along? And that was not my understanding at all. I mean, having been, like I said, in a favored status and being in a non-favored status, the type of things I was being written up for were very clearly kind of the Merritt College, the students are drinking too much bottled water sort of problems. Like, you know, a supply closet that only instructors are using isn't well enough organized, and it was caught on, you know, photographs on several occasions when you weren't in the office, disorganized, you're in trouble. To which I'd answer, ask, well, I mean, what about this Chempack storage unit being completely obstructed? And this is an asset that's supposed to be deployable 24 hours a day, in the event of emergency. It's a federal asset, and it's got tables. Well, this is about you, sort of thing. So,
So you're going to fight on. I mean, you're raising this. You're saying it's unfair what they're doing to you.
When I first encountered my attorney, I was probably on number 2 or pretty close to thereabouts of 2 or 3 complete nervous breakdowns. Probably had 6 nervous breakdowns over this whole period. And one of the things I said is, can I just quit? What do you think? I don't know if I had, because he was getting me some at the time he wasn't interested in representing me, and he said, I'll do a little hourly work for you, but I've got a lot of clients, I don't know everything about your case, so I'll do a little bit of work for you, but not a lot. And he gave me some free advice, and one of the things I asked is, what about me just giving up? Should I just quit? And he said, there's not a lot of jobs out there. So there's the fact that, I've, due to my attorney's fees and other things I've had to do to, like life stuff, like taking care of my car and stuff like that, I've become, I'm heading towards foreclosure with my house. I'm having to do all sorts of kind of life gymnastics that I never thought I'd have to do to keep my head above water. Working 40 hours a week at work, and I'm the only, working on the weekends on my job too. I racked up part of this. One of the things that happened is I became assigned to work weekends doing community programs and during the week for my job, even though flex time per the MOUs doesn't exist, and overtime didn't exist. And then I would work on my case, so it was very stressful. And, I'd say, almost weekly, I think about, how glorious it would be to turn in my paperwork and do something else, because I feel like management has been very successful in making me very uncomfortable at work. But at the same time, I think what we're standing on is so focused on truth, and it's one reason I work so hard not to speculate. And what what we're talking about is so important that I try to remind myself daily. This is just a job for me, but if we can institutionalize some change from the inside, that would be possibly really positive. And there's not a lot of benefit of me trying to have a positive impact from the outside as a citizen or somebody who just sits at home in a room writing public information requests and trying to mobilize. The level of chaos at the administrative level and reinventing the wheel is sometimes so overwhelming, it's hard to look at that as that simple. Because remember that clinical QI, or quality improvement, is one facet of overall emergency medical service on the administrative level. Now that I do training, you know, it's they've, other than my you know, the community program aspect of my work, I really just try and make sure people get the classes that they need. So by kind of definition, my voice is irrelevant on some of these other issues, and maybe that's by design. But I would, you know, it's always unfortunate when the people who care about something give up just because they're working in a situation where the wrong things are going on. And I've seen it happen in the field. I've seen people who, you know, worked on the ambulance who really cared about patients and had very jaded, non-caring ambulance partners or other ambulance staff and became very disheartened and quit. And those are exactly the people you want running your 911 calls, you know. So it seemed like that, you know, from an outsider's perspective, having seen that, you know, on a smaller scale in the field, it's like I would definitely want to try and stick around. Well, it's very clear that, to me, that management has a direction they're pursuing with me. You know, very orchestrated. I basically try to do my job. I think, especially being a resident employee of Oakland, these things, you know, are in all of our interest. I've been invited to attend a committee on standard for first aid kits in 911 by COLLUSION a few years ago, and that was really interesting. And I was also invited to come back this month, and it's interesting to note when you're kind of at the administrative level how, you know, on one hand, I'm participating in these, you know, looking at the laws and rules for the state of California. On the other hand, my same division is being written up for violations of, you know, the aerosolized transmittable disease policy sort of thing. So it's you know, the irony doesn't escape me on those points. And, you know, one of the things that is, I think, very difficult to accept is that, you know, there's always a human element in anything that humans do, and humans aren't perfect. But certainly in situations that involve emergency medicine or public safety, you would hope that people always strive to follow the rules and do as good a job as possible. And so, you know, it's been a struggle.
And why were they written up? Why weren't they following the policies?
Interestingly, that there was a meningitis incident, and it was pretty serious. And the COLLUSION did an investigation and found that we didn't have an aerosolized transmittable disease policy, which had just been instituted a few months ago as law. So that it wasn't as though that had been a standing rule that the department had never been following. But interestingly, one of the things that we were penalized for was not having a mechanism to communicate between departments for exposures. And believe it or not, there was a revised form that we had done, I want to say at least a year earlier, that we had submitted for approval that had that mechanism at the bottom, meaning, you know, what happened? I was splashed in the face with blood. Who else was on scene? Were they splashed in the face with blood? Do they know the patient has you know, a possible disease, or, you know, those sort of things, to allow for an administrator to look, oh, okay, well, this person got splashed in the face in the blood, so did the police officer and the ambulance provider. We need to make sure that they are also aware that we're doing an investigation. And that document had been a draft of that document. It seems kind of intuitive, but that had been written into the aerosolized transmittable disease law for the state of California, and we were also dinged for not having that, even though it had been submitted a year earlier. So interesting little things like that you're like, it's kind of not a big surprise when eventually there's a consequence for not acting on what would seem to be sound recommendations.
Did you make the COLLUSION complaints?
Interestingly, I was blamed for the fine, and I'm not going to get too specific of that because that has to do with a whole other line that we haven't. Like I said, there's just an incredible amount of information we're already looking at. But my boss held me personally responsible, even though, this is the interesting thing, I did redraft the aerosolized transmittable disease policy, which was recognized as so good that he took it and forwarded it to all these other fire departments who recognized they needed the policy. And so it was an interesting time, but it was also, and continues to be extremely stressful. Around the time, and maybe this was, I want to say, July 2006, they were replacing the roof of the EMS division. It was commonly known that there was asbestos in the building by the manager from the port, the facilities manager, and he said, it's not a hazard unless you find things falling from the ceiling. Well, sure enough, they're replacing the roof, and there's this particulate matter that had fallen all over from the ceiling. So I said, well, I think we should be concerned because we were instructed that asbestos wasn't a hazard unless things are falling from the ceiling. They're banging on the roof all day long, things are falling from the ceiling. So I tried to contact my boss, my interim boss, by voicemail and email, and they didn't get back to me. So I chose to call the hazmat station, who recommended an evacuation of the building. We evacuated the building, and I ended up, basically, my judgment got called into question, and I got yelled at for a long period of time. And by yelled at, I do mean yelling, not just somebody said something that wasn't nice to me.
Who yelled at you?
Nina Morris.
And what did she say?
That I wasn't following the chain of command, but safety issues are usually a time when you break the chain of command. So I just understood that maybe that she was upset, possibly having felt embarrassed or not knowing what to do. But she also made it clear that, what did she say? She said something kind of ominous, like something to the extent that you are in a non-favored status.
So this may have had something to do with, they didn't like the fact you were whistleblowing. That you basically wanted to protect your health and safety.
Well,
and you went outside and you actually got action done to protect your health and safety.
Not just protecting my health and safety. You gotta understand. I mean, this is acting on the advisements of safety that have been recommended by the building manager. So this is the sort of thing where you're just trying to act in due regard. So whether it's my safety or anybody else's, I thought the matter was pretty simple as far as exercising good judgment to evacuate a building for very reasonable purposes. I mean, people will have to evacuate a building when a fire alarm goes off, when a little kid pulls it, let alone when you see particulate matter that you've been warned might be asbestos. I had noticed that my mailbox, that there had been removed, and there was a mailbox provided for, or a mail delivery system for every person in the EMS division other than me, and I was concerned about that. And then a couple days later, I want to say on October 4th or 5th of last year, I was requested to attend an informal meeting with my boss where he basically for 2 hours said almost anything that he could to convince me that I should either quit in 3 months or that he would have me fired in a year, and that it was in my best interest to quit, and he'd write me a basic letter of reference and do something within his power to get me another job, even printed out job applications, and asked me to sign a letter of resignation, which he did not provide at the spot. And that very night, he called me on my personal cell phone and said, demanded that I pay $600 of text messaging fees going back 2 years, and asked that I bring a blank check into work, but if I agreed to quit by the next day, he would somehow make everything better. The city still hasn't provided us with the text messaging records that any other city staff has, or all other city staff has been held accountable the way I have. And going back 2 years seems pretty desperate, but it seemed pretty clear the way that was being cast by that point. And then I was put, just true to his word, he was going to put the machine in motion to get rid of me as soon as possible. So he put me on monthly reviews, performance reviews, weekly coaching sessions, which gravitated more towards giving me additional assignments above and beyond staff meetings, and mocking me and bullying me and that sort of thing. And
what was the bullying like? I mean, what exactly do you mean by
well, belittling sort of activities, insulting behavior. I don't want to get too specific because it's a lot of information I'm referencing, and I want to make sure that everything I say is accurate, but we do have very well documented specific instances of this was said at this point, this was said at that point.
Threats and
maybe veiled, but I don't
But trying to intimidate you, to pressurize you to quit, I mean, basically.
I think basically trying to say, here, look, I've given you this job that's untenable. It's untenable, isn't it? It's untenable. Look, you're not tying your shoes the way I like it. It's untenable, and then, other stuff that's just, I can't even understand, why a professional specifically in a position of authority would think it's appropriate to say certain things. So some things are just beyond the pale. But having said that, doing things like scheduling these sort of meetings on my Outlook calendar, putting like a letter of suspension review, I'm on my Outlook calendar, which is open to my coworkers and the people I supervise, that sort of thing. I'm kind of ad-libbing that title. I don't know if it's specifically letter of suspension review, but that sort of thing on my Outlook calendar where anybody can see. So things that would basically make it clear to other people that, I guess Sean's in big trouble. I guess Sean's not doing his job, to kind of what I would call, some sort of professional, undermining me professionally, openly.
Public humiliation.
Sure, within my work environment. And then, suddenly, and I do accredit this specifically not to any union action at all, but to the league being fortunate enough to have an attorney who agrees with or has agreed to represent me and be passionate enough about representing me, that we have pushed our case hard enough that suddenly all of this stopped, and suddenly I have become shifted under. I have a new boss. But even then, the meeting is, this is your job expectation. Do you understand it? Let's read every single line. What are these policies? You understand it. And as an administrator, I understand those are put in place so that we can always say in the future, you didn't follow this. That's why we're doing this. So I get the impression, even though that is something you're supposed to do with employees, maybe in my circumstance, it's possibly a continuation of the ball that's already rolling. And it was even told to me, look, we have a new boss, but it's not making any of this go away. It's not making any of this go away. So, which is unfortunate because me and my attorney, and I believe my union support, believe that what has, been documented against me is largely hot air, especially compared to the performance of almost anybody else. I mean, working through lunches, working weekends, as far as the personnel hours that they get out of me, it's a lot of work, and the level of supervision and what I do.
I'm Phil Horne, and I'm representing Sean Gillis. The key issues, the first issue is collusion between fire and police. If you are not familiar with this idea, it may come as a surprise to you that fire colludes with police in excessive use of force cases. And we have evidence that that has happened in several cases. Oscar Grant is the highest profile case that we have evidence that it's happened in.
And how does this happen?
It happens a couple of different ways. The way it happened in Oscar Grant's case is that a first responder, Oakland Fire, will see a police excessive use of force case, and they will either put the nail in the coffin, further the misconduct or the injuries that the victim of the excessive use of force has suffered. And that's one way. Another way is by interfering with the accident scene. So we know of another case where two people were in a car slumped over the wheel, separate cars. They were taken to the hospital. At the hospital, they were found to have bullet wounds. It seemed that they could not have inflicted bullet wounds on each other behind the wheel. So that might be a case that involves interference with evidence that could indicate collusion in an excessive use of force case.
So in the Oscar Grant case, what do you think has happened?
Well, in the Oscar Grant case, it's pretty clear that the first responder, Oakland Fire, mishandled the case. The paramedic only treated one of the wounds. There was an entry and an exit wound. Only treated one of the wounds with an airtight dressing. And since this is a chest injury, it must be treated with an airtight treatment. And the failure to treat it with an airtight treatment can be fatal and is well known to be fatal. The egregiousness of a paramedic making a mistake that a EMT, which is someone who's just gone through a couple of months of training, would not make, and a paramedic is an RN basically. When an RN makes a mistake that an EMT would not make, that indicates something more than just a mistake. That indicates that it might be intentional misconduct, something that really needs to be investigated as a high priority.
So why has no investigation been done?
That's a very good question. That's a question that somebody needs to answer. We have contacted the city attorney, we've contacted the union, we've contacted the chief, we've contacted the interim chief, we've contacted the supervisor, we've contacted the district attorney. Nobody is interested in investigating this misconduct that occurred with respect to Oscar Grant.
And what's the response of the union been?
The response of the union has been best summarized by Union Rep Vicki Larson in her statement to Sean at his Skelly hearing. She told him as he was going into the Skelly hearing that his papers were crazy. So in other words, it was crazy to suggest that Sean's insistence that the Oscar Grant case be investigated could form the basis for all of the retaliation that he occurred immediately after he was told to stop the investigation.
And are you, it seems like there's systemic problems in what is going on. What are the systemic problems?
There are systemic problems. There was a documentary made in 2000 that was called Test of Courage. And the Test of Courage documentary was produced by PBS and involved examining Oakland Fire's attitudes towards racial and sexual inclusivity with their employees. In other words, the Test of Courage was white male firefighters working with female firefighters and black firefighters. Could they do it? And the documentary indicates a lot of hesitancy. The quotes on the documentary come from the person Mr. Hoffman, who is currently the interim chief. So one of the big problems is that the department is being run by the same people that seem to have indicated a resistance to proactively integrating the fire department in the year 2000.
So you think like the opposition to community training and community relations is part of this issue?
Yes, there are many issues. The most significant issues are the fact that they do not have any field oversight of paramedics, even though county law requires it. The next most important issue, or the next issues, are discrimination against women and discrimination against people of color. And there are also issues with misappropriation of Measure Y money and deliberately disfavoring.
Well, what is Measure Y money? Why would that be?
Okay, Measure Y is a program where a special tax was passed that was designed to fund at-risk student or at-risk youth mentoring. The fire department and the police department are supposed to maintain at-risk youth mentoring in order to receive Measure Y money. Oakland Fire Department receives $4 million every year from Measure Y, but has no at-risk youth mentoring programs. They're required to have an at-risk youth mentoring program in every fire station, and they have none. They should not be receiving the $4 million unless they can have an at-risk youth mentoring program.
And is the city aware of this? Is Gene Kwan, the mayor, aware of it in the city? That there's basically misappropriation of funds if they're using these funds improperly without carrying out the requirement of the funding?
Well, if the city attorney is doing their job in reporting what we have made them aware of to the mayor, then she is aware of it.
What were the other issues?
Well, the other issue is Merritt College. Merritt College is a historically black school and has an EMT program which allows people from Merritt College to get trained to be EMTs, to begin a professional life. The Merritt College under Mr. Gillis provided Merritt College students with access to fire department equipment and fire department experiences. Merritt College is being excluded right now from fire department facilities in favor of a for-profit college called NCTI Incorporated. NCTI is a school run from Colorado. It has a historically white student body. And since one of the big requirements for a job at Oakland Fire Department is fire experience, the exclusion of Merritt College and the inclusion of NCTI will serve to continue the historic discrimination against people of color and probably women also.
Is this part of the privatization of the services?
This is part of the privatization. One of the things that Sean didn't tell you is that another reason that he knows that he was targeted for retaliation is that he was assigned to a job that we have emails showing that his boss already intended to privatize and give to NCTI. So the paramedic training position was going to be given to NCTI. So he was basically a position that they were planning to phase out. So it was the perfect crime, if you will.
And are any of these people getting financial rewards from this privatization?
Of course. The supervisor, Mr. Sugiyama, we have emails showing that he would be receiving a paid position. He has had paid positions. He's been involved or close to a very scandalous misappropriation at the county level in his previous position involving AMR. And we have emails showing that a certain percentage of the tuition paid was to go to a fund that was to be set up, a nonprofit, and the fire department for that nonprofit information. And in fact, no such nonprofit has been set up. So it would seem that there is a pot of gold, or at least there's a bank account somewhere that's not accounted for.
And has the union been made aware of this?
Yes, the union's been made aware of
Filed
this.
a grievance?
No, they have not filed a grievance. We've sent somewhere around 10 requests to Vicki Larson asking her to file a grievance, and she refused to do so.
Privatization is obviously an issue for the union, that they're privatizing city jobs and threatening public services. What is the response of the union been?
Right. Yes, Vicki Carson has been made aware of this complaint that Mr. Sugiyama is trying to privatize Sean's position and other positions at the fire department. We have made about 10 requests that she grieve these issues, and she has refused to respond to the request for grievances. It seems that there is some reason that she is aligning herself with the effort to privatize the schools, or to privatize the positions.
What is it?
I don't know. I don't know.
Is Bob Muscat been made aware of it?
He has been made aware of it. I've sent him certified letters.
So you sent, why don't you say, I sent?
Yes, I sent certified letters to Mr. Muscat asking him to grieve Mr. Gillis's allegations, and he has refused to do so.
Did he explain why?
No, he did not explain why. The only contact I got from Mr. Muscat was a letter that said pretty tersely that the union was no longer going to be representing Mr. Gillis for any purposes because I was helping him with his civil service appeal of his suspension. So because he was represented in the suspension, they were no longer going to help him in any other way.
So they've abandoned his...
They've abandoned him. They will not go with him to any meetings, any investigations, and that leaves Sean in a vulnerable spot because if he cannot have somebody there when he's being investigated for whatever they choose to investigate him for, they will not let me go because the MOU says it has to be a union rep. So that leaves him alone in the face of an investigation.
Have you filed charges with PERB?
We have talked to PERB. Unfortunately, PERB generally works through trying to mediate a situation. So you're looking at a several-month process to get a mediation where the union promises that they won't do it again. But it's a lot of effort for what seems like very little value.
Okay. Why do you think the union would not be taking up this issue?
As an experienced attorney, it's generally a financial reason. So I don't know. I have been told that the union has been given dental benefits to manage, and that these are lucrative dental benefits, and that there's a financial component to it.
What do you want to see out of the outcome of this case?
The most important things that happen is that there needs to be an investigation of what happened to Oscar Grant. There needs to be a determination as to whether this paramedic is appropriate to have in the continued employment at the fire department. There needs to be a serious effort to address the history of racism and sexism in the fire department. And there needs to be an accounting for the Measure Y money. What's going to happen next with the Measure Y money?
Do you think this is going to happen?
Well, now's the opportunity to do it. We have an interim chief, and that is because they are looking for a new chief. The contracts are being renegotiated right now. in my mind, they could get rid of some managers, save a lot of money, and the whole system would work better.